Live from Richmond, Virginia, this is The People's Debate. Brought to you by AARP Virginia and the League of Women Voters of Virginia. The People's Debate.
Welcome to The People's Debate. Tonight, in the race for one of Virginia's U.S. Senate seats, the candidates will answer questions about the issues the voters of Virginia face. I'm Bill Fitzgerald, your moderator. Now, some ground has been covered in prior debates. We're going to try to plow new ground tonight. We may come back to some of those issues. But first, let's introduce you to the candidates. Joining us tonight are former Virginia governor and current U.S. Senator, Democrat Mark Warner, and his challenger tonight, Republican Ed Gillespie. Tonight's debate is being broadcast on television stations throughout Virginia, and you can join a live conversation about the debate on Twitter using the hashtag #PeoplesDebate. Now here's a look at the guidelines for tonight's debate. Candidates will answer questions from our panel of 4 and me. For each question, both candidates will have 90 seconds to respond. Then the first candidate will have an additional 60 seconds to rebut. The candidates will alternate taking the first response to each question, and a signal will determine when their time is up. The candidates will also have 2 minutes each for opening and closing statements. Who goes first has been decided by a coin toss. Now let's meet the panel. Joining us tonight is Kristen Goss. She's the president of the League of Women Voters of Arlington. From WCVE, PBS, political reporter for WCVO, Craig Carper. And the president of AARP Virginia is joining us tonight, Bob Blancato. And from WTVR CBS 6, anchor Cheryl Miller. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Now, it was determined by a coin toss that Mr. Gillespie will go first. He will be the first to deliver his opening statement. A second coin toss has also determined Mr. Gillespie will get to answer the first question now. So, let us start with opening statements. Mr. Gillespie, you may begin.
Thank you, and it's great to be with everyone here tonight. Mark, it's good to be with you again. I'm running for the United States Senate because I want future generations to have the same opportunities I've had. My grandfather was an immigrant janitor. My parents didn't go to college, and I got to be counselor to the President of the United States of America. But we're losing that kind of economic opportunity and upward mobility as a result of the Obama-Warner policies. President Obama says these policies are on the ballot this year, every single one of them. And in voting with the President 97% of the time, Mark Warner's pretty much voted for every single one of them. These policies are making us less safe as a nation. They're making us less able to meet growing threats to our national security and to our public health and safety. And they're squeezing too many Virginians between lost jobs, lower take-home pay, reduced working hours, and higher prices for health care, energy, and food. In Virginia, since the senator's taken office, 65,000 more women have gone into poverty. For every net job we've created, 2 Virginians have gone on food stamps. And 250,000 of us will have our health care plans canceled as a result of the senator's vote for Obamacare. This election presents a big choice. We can continue down the path of the Obama-Warner policies, or we can take a new and better direction with my 5-point agenda for economic growth that would create jobs, raise take-home pay, lift people out of poverty, hold down health care costs, and reduce energy prices. It's a choice between higher taxes and lower take-home pay, or tax relief and increased wages. A choice between more debt or a balanced budget. More regulations on energy that kill jobs and drive up prices, or unleashing American energy to create jobs and hold down prices. The fact is that my approach would ease the squeeze on hardworking Virginians and make it easier for the unemployed to find work, and I look forward to debating those issues here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gillespie. Mr. Warner.
Well, thank you, Bill, and it's good to see you again, Ed. I'd like to thank our hosts and, most importantly, all the Virginians who are watching tonight. You know, it's been the greatest honor of my life to serve Virginia, first as governor and now as senator. What brought me to public service was the notion that in America, everybody ought to get a fair shot. We can't guarantee you success, but everyone ought to get a fair shot. And to make sure that sense of opportunity exists, we've got to make sure that people in Washington can actually work together. That's what I did as your governor. With a 2-to-1 Republican legislature, we turned a deficit into a surplus, and Virginia got named the best managed state and the best state for business. I've brought that same bipartisan approach to the United States Senate. That's why I'm so honored to have the endorsement of former Republican Senator John Warner, who held this job for 30 years. And I have more former Republican legislators endorsing me this race than when I ran the first time. Now, in the Senate, I've wrestled with issues like bringing down our debt and deficit, making sure our veterans get the care they deserve, bringing jobs back to Virginia, and making sure that young people don't get crushed by student debt. And you know what? On every issue that I've worked on, I always start with a Republican partner, because that's how you get things done, bipartisan. My opponent has a very different approach. He spent his whole career as a D.C. lobbyist and partisan political operative. He sees every issue, not what's in the best interest of the country, but Republican versus Democrat. He even went out and called himself a partisan warrior. Now, I got to tell you, I don't know about you, but I think the last thing Washington needs is another partisan warrior in either political party. In these challenging times, the world needs a strong America, economically, militarily, and morally. And to make that happen, we've got to have leaders in Washington that can work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. And gentlemen, we're going to go right to the questions. As per the coin toss, Mr. Gillespie will answer first. Let's go to Kristen Goss with the League of Women Voters for that first question tonight. Kristen?
Thank you both for being here. Last year, the Supreme Court gutted a key section of the Voting Rights Act that for decades had helped to protect people of color from discriminatory voting laws. Legislation is pending in Congress to update the Voting Rights Act so that its full protections are once again in place. Presumably, the bill will be reintroduced in the next Congress. If elected, will you co-sponsor this legislation?
Well, I would look at that legislation. I believe the provision that it's mostly geared toward is pre-clearance. And the fact is that the Voting Rights Act is critically important, must be enforced. This is one of the most sacred rights we have in America. People have shed blood and died to protect that right. And we saw here just recently in Virginia that the Civil Rights and the Voting Rights Act is being enforced, and we've had our district lines overturned by the court. And it's one example of why the federal courts are so important. And I think, frankly, it's an example why so many Virginians are concerned about the recent reports that Senator Warner made a phone call talking about the potential of recommending the daughter of a state senator for the federal bench, a lifetime appointment to the federal bench in relation to a political decision, whether or not that state senator would stay in his seat or leave his seat. Came in the same time frame as the much-covered story of the governor's chief of staff making a job offer in this regard. You know, this is very serious in terms of the federal bench has a big impact in our lives, and we need to make sure that qualified people are put on the bench. And I would never play politics with recommending judicial appointments, and I certainly wouldn't raise the prospect of it in the context of a decision about expanding Obamacare further in the Commonwealth of Virginia, which was, from what I understand and from what the news reports have said, is what that conversation had to do with.
Mr. Warner, your response to that?
Well, let me first of all answer the question. I strongly would support that legislation. I think we need to expand voting rights. I think it's remarkable in America that we see all around the country efforts to restrict voting rights. Again, oftentimes in a partisan political posturing point. Again, not surprised that my opponent would not be in support of expanding voting rights since he's been that partisan operative. But let's deal with the issue that he just raised. You know, I've been a friend of Senator Philip Puckett and his family for nearly 20 years. You know, when I heard that Philip was considering resigning from the Senate, I reached out to his son, Joseph, and to find out what was going on. During that conversation, we brainstormed about possible opportunities for his sister. His sister had been a substitute state judge, and because of that tenure and legislative process, she couldn't be confirmed. Now, in that brainstorming, we talked about a lot of different options, but let me make clear, I did not offer her a job, nor would I offer her any kind of position. The following day, I talked to Senator Puckett. At that point, he had decided he was going to resign. He'd even drafted his letter of resignation. I've been friends with the Puckett family for a long time, and I respect the senator's decision.
Mr.